Joining us tonight. I would like to welcome Chairman Paul Berry, who will share some opening remarks with us. Go ahead, Paul. I don't think we can hear you, Paul.
Paul, go ahead and speak. There we go. We can hear you.
Apologies, I can't hear any audio right now, but I did see that I'm able to speak, and I think everyone can hear me, so I'll just jump in. Thank you, Supervisor Harity, for hosting the town hall tonight. Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Berry. I am a Hunter Mill resident. I'm chair of the Redistricting Advisory Committee. The committee, just a little background on who we are, why I'm here tonight, and what we're discussing. The first phase of our work was to execute the task of the decennial redistricting. Every 10 years, we have to redraw magisterial district lines in the county, and the Redistricting Advisory Committee was assembled by the Board of Supervisors to undertake that task. We completed that in December. Took us about 6 months. And in December, the board decided to extend our work because public feedback during the redistricting part indicated that there were, if there were district changes, that individuals in the county felt that some of the names of the districts needed to be reevaluated. This was certainly inspired by the work that Supervisor Rodney Lusk and Lee District is undertaking currently. That work is ongoing, and there's been a lot of work around the Confederate Names Task Force, for example, or the Lee Jackson Highway renaming group. So this work is a continuation of that in the same spirit. The Redistricting Advisory Committee, very importantly, we're evaluating what districts and precincts might need to be renamed. We are not doing the renaming ourselves. We're an all-volunteer citizen, 100% citizen composed, 100% citizen-led group that is evaluating the names through public input, review of historical archives, and any other input that we find from academic or historical sources. But just to really underscore that we're just looking at the names and we will make a recommendation to the board to rename a district or not, but we will not be doing the renaming. If the board eventually decides to move forward with the renaming, that would be up to the citizens themselves who it's directly impacting. But we on the RAC don't have any control over that process, and we will not be choosing names, choosing new names or anything like that. Our work, importantly, doesn't impact schools or school districts. We won't be renaming schools or school districts either. Our work is guided by the One Fairfax policy. For those that aren't familiar with the One Fairfax policy, it was adopted by the board in 2016, excuse me. It's a social and equity agenda. It is not a set of laws or requirements. It is a way of evaluating policy choices to ensure that all Fairfax residents achieve the best quality of life. So again, it's not a set of requirements. It's just a way of evaluating decisions such as the choice to rename a district or precinct. Quickly, just a little bit about our work. We have met 4 or 5 times and we're preparing a report. We encourage you to join our meetings they're on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 6 to 8 p.m. You can join virtually or over the phone. We have decided to take up some magisterial districts for possible renaming, such as Lee District. And tonight, of course, we're here to discuss Springfield. Springfield was originally brought to the RAC's attention by members of the public during that first phase. Those members of the public submitted concerns through written testimony that's available online for anyone to view right now. And tonight, I'm very happy to be part of this community discussion, and myself and Representative Lindler will be listening. I think I saw Representative Marin also, who is joining from the RAC. We want as much public input as possible, as much participation, not just tonight, but ongoing. My email and phone number is available to anyone that wants it. There's an email for the county if you want to submit written testimony there. You can join one of our meetings and have an opportunity to speak before the RAC members and the public. We really want this to be an inclusive process, and I will note that this is the only town hall that's been scheduled. I really want to thank and commend the Office of Supervisor Harity and the supervisor himself for creating this opportunity for us all to gather together and talk about the future of the county. So I think I talked a little bit too long. I will pass the mic back over to the supervisor. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Paul. We actually had you on here for 15 minutes, and I'm glad you didn't take the whole 15, and I won't take the whole 15 they have me on, because I really want to hear from our citizens. But I want to thank you and also the Redistricting Advisory Committee for your good work on redistricting. I think you ran a really good process. You ended up with a really good result. It really consolidated West Springfield in the Springfield district. And I think it was a disservice to you and our citizens when the board picked a map that had never been commented on or seen in public or shared with this supervisor that did the opposite and split West Springfield into 3 supervisory districts. But yeah, I thought you and the RAC, and I want to thank you for your countless hours of volunteer work that you did in that process. And I know you're trying to run as equally a transparent process here on the renaming. And I appreciate the time that you and the other members are putting forth here. As you said, tonight, we're going to be discussing the possibility of renaming the Springfield district. Interestingly, as you mentioned earlier, we're not talking about the new names, so we're not going to be taking comments on what it should be. Hopefully that will be able to come out of my office in a process that gets led here. But tonight it's about hearing from Springfield district residents on their thoughts on renaming the Springfield district. We've already received pretty substantial feedback from the community. I know the RAC's received over 200 emails. The vast majority of those are against renaming. Since I put my newsletter out, we've gotten over 50 emails, and all but one of those are against renaming the Springfield district. And we're going to go ahead and get those to the RAC here. As soon as we get a few more in, we'll start shooting them your way. Before we get started, and this is really about the public tonight, I'd like to share a few comments. I personally think that we shouldn't be changing the name for a whole lot of reasons, and kind of the number one reason that I've heard from my constituents is really, with all the problems that we've got in front of us, why are we going through this? Especially since there's a lack of any public request or expressed desire to have the name changed Springfield, at least from within my district and my many years of service as Springfield district supervisor. The name Springfield still represents much of the district. It's representative of the Occoquan watershed area of the Springfield. It's full of spring names. I actually live on South Springs Drive. West Springfield High School and over 80% of its students are still in the Springfield district. The West Springfield Post Office, the Government Center, the fire station, and police stations are all in the district. It's where the bulk of the population of Springfield district really is in West Springfield still. I believe a name change is going to cause unnecessary confusion for voters who have lived in Springfield district for many years, and that's been echoed in many emails. There are many references in the Springfield district in our county ordinances, proffers, and other legal documents that will have to be corrected, which is going to cause really an unnecessary administrative burden and expense. And I've encouraged the RAC to get legal, the county attorney to come in and let you know what kinds of things that are going to have to happen there. I feel this is a little interesting in that the same rules aren't being applied to other district names in the same manner. Braddock Road, for which the Braddock district is named, has more more of Braddock Road outside the Braddock district than in it, as well as many Braddock name places like Braddock Park, which is in my district. And we just redid the master plan there. It's a great park out in the western end of the county, and Braddock Farms, which is a big residential community that aren't in it. And I've yet to find anybody that thinks the existing name is offensive. So I'm kind of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I really look forward to hearing from my residents tonight on what they think about the name changed. To be acknowledged to speak, we're going to ask that you raise your hands using the tool on Zoom. And if you're having any difficulty with that, please let us know, and Michael can help you through the chat. We're going to be taking calls first from residents of the Springfield district. Once we get those, we'll take callers from elsewhere in the county. So if you're from the Springfield district and you want to address the group here with either comments or questions, go ahead and raise your hand. We hope to wrap up by 8:30. So with that, we will take our first question. And Michael, who do we got on the phone for the first question?
I believe the first person we have is Mr. Jorge Torico. Is that right, sir?
Yes, thank you so much.
Go ahead.
All right, good evening. Yes, my name is Jorge Torico. I'm a Springfield district resident. I live in Burke, Virginia. I have owned a home here since 2007. I also lived in Kings Park, original Kings Park since 1990. Fairfax County graduate, went to TJ for high school, UVA for college. Raising my family here, 3 students in Fairfax County Public Schools. I want to emphatically indicate that I do not support racist names to be continued to be used in our county, whether it be for a district name, whether it be for a school, whether it be for a road. You know, the context really matters, and the context reveals that many of the names came about for the districts after the Civil War, right? And so Virginia was the capital, held the capital of the Confederacy. And, you know, after the Civil War, there was a lot of effort to try to repaint the history and change the narrative about what the cause of the Civil War was, which was about slavery. And in that process, part of that process brought on by the Daughters of the Confederacy was trying to whitewash the Civil War, trying to whitewash the Confederacy and make it about heritage. And an effort was done to build monuments, to name streets, to name locations, cities, schools, housing zones, Jim Crow laws. All those things together was part eventually capped off by the massive resistance in the 60s after the Brown v. Board of Education. And documents from 1957 were used to guide the naming of our schools in our area up until 1989. My own sons had to find out that their school, Sangster Elementary School, right in the middle of Springfield District, was named after a racist slave-owning family, right? The documents that indicate that, I've emailed them to the commission as well as to the Supervisor Harity, who, this is the first time I'm having an opportunity to address myself to him. I've left voicemails there before, I've emailed, I've never received a response back from my own supervisor. So good evening, Mr. Harity. And at the same time, I would say that we need to recognize that the point that is brought that it's going to be costly and it's going to cause additional cost. We already have to maintain signs. We already have to maintain buildings. We already have to repave roads. All those things still have to happen. When that maintenance, regular maintenance happens, signs have to be updated anyways. Let's understand that there's a cost. Let's understand that the cost is there no matter what. And let's make a choice to no longer support and elect to revere Confederate racist names.
All right, real quick question for you. 2 quick questions for you. The first one is, how do you feel about the Springfield district? Do you feel that's racist and should be changed?
So a lot of the names that were included in the Springfield district, I'm guessing came from the land owners, right? And settlers.
No, we're talking about renaming we're talking about renaming the Springfield district, not the precincts within it. We're talking about the Springfield district. Springfield itself.
Right, so the Springfield district. Supervisor Harity, might I ask you a question? Where does the name Springfield come from? And then I'll answer that question.
The name Springfield comes from the geographic area which I'm standing in right now, which is Springfield. I'm in my district office.
So
I'm
the
in my
Native
district.
Americans call
I'm
this
in my,
land Springfield?
I'm in my district office in Springfield.
Did the Native Americans call this land Springfield?
I don't know the answer to that question.
The answer is no. I think you do know the answer to that. Springfield is not a
Oh.
Native American word.
Okay. Well, yeah, it wouldn't be.
So if we want to name it for a region, let's name it in honor of the Native Americans who owned this land beforehand.
Okay.
Thank you,
From
Mr.
whom it was
Torico.
stolen.
We want to make sure that we're giving an opportunity for other constituents to also express their views and speak. With that said, I would like to now recognize AJ. If AJ can unmute themselves and speak before the Zoom call, please.
I just have one brief, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, one brief comment. The costs associated with a name change, be it Springfield or any place else, are just astronomical. And I would in no way support spending money to change a name that is not offensive. That's my comment. It's just spending needless money. If we maintain Springfield, we don't have to change stationery, signage, laws and regulations, you name it, we'd have to change it. So that would be my comment. Thank you.
All right, who's next? Michael?
Next
Thank you very
speaker
much
we
for that,
have
AJ.
is Andrew. If Andrew can unmute themselves and address themselves before the Zoom call. Thank you.
Yes, my name's Andrew. I live in Springfield District. More important than money or practical considerations like that we're talking about, I'm going to call this what this is. This is Marxist, communist, cultural revolutionary action that you people are taking by trying to destroy community identity, heritage, names that bring significance to the residents who live here, and trying to recreate it in your own socialist, utopian, crazy image. And that's what it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you,
Next up.
Andrew. Next speaker we have is Keith. If Keith can unmute themselves and speak before the Zoom call.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm a long-term Springfield resident, over 28 years, and I absolutely oppose renaming the Springfield district anything but Springfield. I cannot imagine how anybody can construe the name Springfield to connotate it with something offensive. So I am opposed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Keith.
Next speaker we have is Laura. Laura, can you please unmute yourself and speak before us? Thank you.
Hi there, this is Laura. So at the beginning of this, Paul seemed to mention that there were concerns expressed by citizens that put the name of Springfield kind of on the radar. And I'm just wondering what those concerns specifically were.
Laura, was that question addressed to Chair Barry?
Is Paul the guy that opened up, the rack guy that opened up?
Yep.
It's directed to anybody who knows how our name got on the radar and possibly needing to be changed, because I don't understand why somebody thinks it needs to be renamed.
I'll let Paul answer that if he's on and able to. If not, I'll take a stab at it because I watched the rack name where it came up.
Supervisor,
meeting.
happy to.
ahead.
So just to be clear, everyone, that at no point during the RAC proceedings did anyone ever think that the name Springfield was offensive. So that's absolutely not why what the RAC is discussing and why I'm happy to join tonight. The RAC decided on 7 different criteria for evaluating names. Essentially, we said, we need some rules that everyone can agree on for why we're here. What are we doing? One of those criteria these criteria are all available online on the county website if anybody wants to view them. One of them is, does the name, I'm paraphrasing here, does the name best represent life in the county in 2022 and beyond? Essentially, is it geographically relevant? And that's what the Springfield, that's how Springfield was put up for evaluation. Similarly, and I think these are entirely legitimate conversations to have at the RAC, and I encourage anybody to come and share this with the other RAC members that aren't here tonight. If there are other districts or precincts, for that matter, because we're evaluating both, if there are other districts or precincts that don't make sense geographically for whatever reason, please bring that to our attention. I think the supervisor mentioned a couple others. I know that Janae and I have had conversations about those. We're here to have that question because the RAC is also here to say, no, we shouldn't, in the cases where it's appropriate, no, we shouldn't rename, to tell the board emphatically. Residents have spoken to us, that showed up to meetings, have sent in emails, that posted on the Facebook page, and they said, no, we don't want to do this. So that's also part of our process, is to recommend against any changes.
Okay, well, I'm just going to say, based on that, I still don't understand how Springfield does not best represent life in the county geographically. I live in Springfield and I'm in the Springfield district. And so it makes perfect sense to me that I'm in the Springfield district. So again, going back to this, I don't understand why we would even be on the radar, and I'm against it.
Thank you, Laura. Next up.
Next up, we have an iPhone user. Can the user of this iPhone account please identify themselves before the committee and speak? Go ahead.
Maybe you're talking to me. My name's Amy and I'm on an iPhone.
That's you, Amy.
Go ahead.
I live in Springfield. I was previously in the, most recently in the Mount Vernon magisterial district, and now I'm in the Springfield district. And I understand that I don't find the Springfield name is not an offensive name, but I understand the geographic boundaries have changed, and so maybe that is a reason that because of the geographic boundaries changing, if there's a better suited name that represents the new geographic area better, I would be in support of renaming it because of the geographic boundary shift. Thank you.
Well, Amy, welcome to the Springfield district. We'll be reaching out to you all here real soon. But welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you for your comments.
Okay, we have another iPhone user with a hand raised. Could you please unmute yourself and identify yourself before the Zoom call? Okay, we will move on to the next speaker. Kelly, could you please unmute yourself and speak before us? Thank you. Kelly Price, are you able to hear us and speak before us? Kelly? Okay.
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Please go ahead,
Sorry.
Kelly.
I'm in favor of the name change. When I talk to people, I think for the average person, I'm not sure they have a lot of use for using the name of their district, but I do a lot of volunteer work on campaigns, and that's when we do use it a lot. Our campaigns are always divided up by magisterial district, and it just doesn't feel like, I don't live in Springfield, but I live in the Springfield district, and the people that seem to support keeping the name live in, like, their address is Springfield. But I don't feel like it represents me because I don't live in Springfield, and there's a lot of people that don't. And I know that the supervisor says 2/3 of it is still going to be in Springfield, but it still does not acknowledge all of us that aren't in it. And it just is confusing to people when you, like, yes, you live in Springfield, but you at the Springfield district is different. It's confusing to them to know the difference, like when you're trying to get petitions and that kind of thing. Knowing if they live in the district versus the town of Springfield. And it just doesn't make much sense when you're like going out to, Chantilly and down to Lorton, and it's just, it seems irrelevant to the naming of the district for a lot of us.
Yeah, what section of the district are you from, Kelly?
I'm in Burke.
Oh, you're in Burke. Okay, so you're right around the corner. Do your
I'm on the Parkway.
Okay. Do your kids go to West Springfield or do they go to Lake Braddock?
Those would be imaginary because I do not have any.
Oh, if they did, or they would go to West
If I
Springfield,
did,
I assume.
Where would they go? I guess, I don't know.
West Springfield.
I don't know, probably.
Yeah, West Springfield.
I never thought about
Okay.
it.
All right. Thank you very much for your comments.
you.
Next up, we have Matthew. Matthew, could you please unmute yourself and identify yourself before the town hall, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I live in Springfield and my kids have gone through West Springfield High School. Our family is absolutely against the renaming of it. The points that have been brought up earlier, where does this stop? Fairfax is named after a slave owner. Virginia was a slave owning state. Burke is named after a slave owner. At what point does this stop? Everyone who lived in the East Coast was a slave owner. It has to stop somewhere. Do we celebrate the generals of the war? Maybe not, but there has to be a point at which we say enough is enough and we move forward. We can't go back and rename the area to what the Native Americans or the natives that were here before the white man arrived. We can't go back and do that. We can't go back and do that in Europe either. Stop. There's a point at which sanity has to take over and the insanity has to stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. Next up.
Next up, we have Patricia. Patricia, could you please unmute yourself and identify yourself before the town hall? Thank you. Patricia, can you hear us?
You were unmuted for a second and then you went back to muted.
Patricia, would you still like to speak before the town hall?
There I am. I think, can you hear me?
Yes.
Now we can hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. I was trying to unmute. I'm in total agreement with Matthew, but for different reasons. I don't remember receiving or hearing when Fairfax County residents asked the Board of Supervisors to spend taxpayer dollars for this committee. I don't think it represents the majority of Fairfax County residents. I think this is very politically motivated. And I would love to see the Board of Supervisors spending taxpayer money where it needs to be, whether it needs to be supporting our police department or whether it means increasing social services programs, especially as more families are suffering during this economic time. It's just infuriating to know that so many of our problems are not really on the top priority list for the Board of Supervisors. I agree that for some people, the districting has always been a little bit confusing, but I think in a time where we really need to be stringent on our budget and really help the citizens of Fairfax County, I think, the Board of Supervisors are allocating our resources and misdirecting them to programs and this committee or whatever, without really the trust and the actual direction of citizens in this county. So I would just love to see a better use of taxpayer money. This is maybe something that maybe if it's necessary and a majority of Fairfax County residents want this, I think it's something that should be voted on versus something that, is directed by a committee that nobody voted for in office. Fairfax County citizens have no idea of their credibility. And the Board of Supervisors just suddenly brought this, this up in a coincidentally a very political time where these are issues that are coming up. So That's just my opinion. And I'm a taxpayer. I live in Fairfax County, always have. I've never had a problem with it, districting names. My parents are immigrants into this country. I do not understand how any of these words or historians, these areas look named, after, historic Virginians is offensive. We have a history. Some of it's great, some of it's not so great. We have to accept it. We have to move forward from it, but we have to learn from it. And like I said, if the majority of citizens want to rename, I'd love to see it on the ballot only and not just, arbitrarily created by the board.
Thank you very much for your comments, Patricia. And I think that, as I said earlier, the number one response I got is, why are we spending any time at all with all the problems we got in front of us dealing with renaming Springfield District? But I appreciate your comments. Next up.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Elaine. Elaine, could you please unmute your mic and identify yourself?
Yes, hi, can everyone hear me? I'm Elaine, and I just want to say I really appreciate all you do, Mr. Harity. I remember when I asked you to, as a parent, to come to West Springfield High School 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was, you were happy to join and support our high school for a fundraising event. So, and I appreciate you holding this session tonight. I'd just like to say that I agree with not changing the name. I think that it's something that is bringing up a lot of points. I don't know what the basis is for it. Perhaps I'd like to understand that more. But even if it is about, erasing heritage, perhaps maybe we could consider using some other way of honoring people who had occupied the land before we were in possession of it, or if it has to do with slave ownership, we can honor in a different way with statues or parks. The thing is I remember being stationed overseas with my husband, and I remember touring parts of their unfortunate part of history. And I remember having someone say to me, well, this building is no longer going to exist. And I thought, wow, they're going to wipe it out. And when they wipe it out, then what? Who will be reminded of what to avoid or what behaviors to avoid and what to look out for? That kind of also gets forgotten. Finally, just as a personal note, I grew up here and I left here and I came back, but my parents are no longer around. And when the name is gone, so is part of my heritage. And so I'd hate to see it change. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Elaine. Michael, I can hear you talking in the office, but you're on mute.
Jean, could you please unmute yourself and speak before the town hall?
Oh, yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes, how you doing, Mr. Harity?
I'm doing good.
So I've been hearing both sides of this discussion for renaming and not renaming. I am 150% against not renaming, keeping Springfield as the name. I've been in the Northern Virginia area since the early 1970s. Grew up here, lived my life here, and have family here. And I believe that there's value in preserving the history. That there's nothing in my mind at all offensive about the name Springfield. So to think otherwise just makes absolutely no sense. And as other callers have said, where does it stop? Where does it end? Where does it end? If you rename here, you're going to rename someplace else. I mean, where does it end? You got to preserve the history. It's not offensive. It's not offensive, and people have had personal experiences here, their whole lives, 40, 50 years. They've had family that grew up here, lived here, and died here, and died here, frankly. There's people that are buried here in Springfield, that people that go to high school here, schools here and everything else. So there's a lot of, personal attachments to Springfield. To sit here and think about a renaming, because some people feel, offensive or feel like they're, it's just, to me, makes absolutely no sense. And do you want to chime in or? Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you, Gene.
Thank you. Next up, we have Susan. Susan, could you please unmute yourself and identify yourself, please? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Susan Lamy. I live in Springfield. Wanted to thank Supervisor Harity and the commission for this opportunity to speak about the name change. I don't think we've ever had a chance to give input about the name, so this is great for me. Unlike Jean, who just spoke, I've only been here a short time, 35 years. And in that time, I've never really understood the naming of anything around here. There's Springfield is supposedly a town that I live in. It's my mailing address, but I don't know where Springfield is. There's no town. Then we have, as the supervisor points out, we have a lot of West Springfields, but there's no town there either. There is at least a government center and a post office called West Springfield. Where Burke starts, I have no idea. I have friends and neighbors just a couple miles away who identify themselves as being from West Springfield. But when I write to them, their address is Springfield. I'm probably in West Springfield. It's very confusing. So I finally looked up the history of the name of Springfield. And according to a local historian, it turns out that it was named by a guy who sounds a lot like a railroad robber baron after his farm. He called it Springfield Farm. He didn't live in Springfield. He lived in Alexandria. He was a wealthy merchant as well as running this railroad that benefited his own farm and products. So he doesn't seem like the kind of guy we need to venerate in any way by maintaining the name. The closest thing we seem to have in the whole district to a real town with a main street is Clifton, and they can't very well identify with the name of Springfield. And worse than that probably are the folks north of them that are sandwiched in closer to Fairfax City than anywhere else. So I think the name we've got is very confusing. And, frankly, Supervisor, I looked at your reasons and I didn't understand them very well. It seemed more like they were reasons trying to justify a decision that had already been made rather than logically coming up with a reason to continue with the name. You tried to justify Springfield, but with all the West Springfields thrown in there. So I didn't understand that. And the other point that you made about the difficulty of renaming in code, it seems that's a simple one-line addition to the code saying heretofore references to Springfield will be equal to X, whatever that new name might be. And the thing about us being confused, I don't usually in daily life have an opportunity or a reason to refer to Springfield District. I admit I've gotten confused every once in a while when the location of my voting precinct changed. And I even got confused about my name one time after a marriage thing, standing in the wrong line alphabetically. But I think I could pretty well handle a change to the name of the district. So the only thing and there's no road signs that have to be changed. So it seems maybe that the only thing we'd have to change would be your business cards, Supervisor Harity, and I'm willing to give like a $5 donation towards changing your business cards. I think we should change it so that we have a more inclusive name that people who are in any part of the district could feel like they were part of that community, whether they were in the westernmost little tiny corner, whether they were in Clifton, whether they were in Burke, in West Springfield or Springfield. That would be the fairest thing to do. Thank you.
And what part of the district are you from, Susan?
I don't know. I live off the Parkway. I sort of think I'm sort of right on the line between Burke and West Springfield.
What do you use as a mailing address?
Well, I didn't have a choice. They gave me Springfield.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Next person we have up is Frank Anderson. Frank, could you please unmute yourself and identify yourself before the town hall? Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Supervisor Harity, for hosting this. Thank you, members of the redistricting committee. As Supervisor Harity knows, I work for Supervisor Walkinshaw in the Braddock District, but I don't have any special insight on this process. So I'm just going to speak for myself here. I'm kind of ambivalent on the issue. I live in the Burke precinct, 801. So my polling place is, West Springfield High School.
Yep.
My kids are going to go to Lake Braddock Secondary School because we're bordered to the north, east, and west by Braddock District. So I'm Braddock adjacent. That being said, now that the state has redistricted our legislative districts, they chopped our precinct in half. So the north side above the power easement is going to have to be its own precinct because it can't be merged with something that's in another district. So we're probably going to end up voting somewhere else.
No, you're actually going to stay at West Springfield.
Okay, so it'll be two different precincts, one on the north, one on the south, that maybe vote in the same place. Because we can't, be in the same precinct any longer. But my point is, the only thing I wanted to bring up was that I'm a little unsure about how whatever the effort is to talk about Springfield District's name, how that is a political thing. I just don't get it. It's not one of the issues that's come up with regard to a name being offensive. I don't believe it's offensive. I don't think anybody's ever said it's offensive. So I'm just trying to understand what is political about the renaming suggestion. Like I said, I don't have a position on it, but I just want some clarity. I appreciate that. Thank you again, Supervisor Harity and members of the RSC.
And thank you, Frank. All right, so is that all the Springfield District residents?
Yes,
Michael?
sir. Those
Oh,
were
we
all
got-
the
We
individuals.
got one
that
more,
had
Elaine. I think Elaine just raised her hand.
raised their hand. Yes. Sir, would you like to now open up the speaking time to any guests in the lobby that wish to speak?
Any guests? Yes, if they raise their hand, yes.
So if you'd
Elsewhere in
like
the
to be
county.
recognized, please raise your hand using the Zoom tool and we'll recognize you in order of hand raised.
Okay, we had Elaine had her hands up. Did she pull it down?
Yes, sir. And we're getting a number of hands up. Again, just as a reminder, if you'd like to be recognized, please raise your hand and I will make a speakers list. With that said, Elaine, please go ahead and unmute yourself and speak before the committee. Thank you.
Yes, hi. I'm sorry. I just had a question after I heard some of the points being raised. So am I correct? The name change is only going to be with the Springfield district, but it's not going to be for, like, if I drive and I see Springfield on 495, that's not going to change, or is it?
That's correct. It's the district that's going to be renamed. That's correct.
Okay, so but why would they keep Springfield if the district's name changes? Have they?
Well, I don't think either should be changed, but
Right, no, I don't
it's
either,
not in their-
but
It's
I
not,
was
it's
just
not in
trying to
their,
figure it
it's
out.
not, yeah, it's not in their purview to change the
Okay.
town name.
Okay, great, thank you.
Janae,
Thank you,
I
Elaine.
saw that you raised your hand. Did you want to add a perspective from the committee?
I do. I wanted to read all of you something. There's 7 questions that we had to be asked by this redistricting, renaming redistrict committee. And I think I'm going to go ahead. Can I read all 7 of those questions, Pat?
Sure.
Okay. Number 1 question, if they meet any of these criteria, in violation of the spirit or explicit meaning of the One Fairfax policy. Number 2, offensive to the community. Number 3, related to the Confederate past. Number 4, associated with segregation, Jim Crow, racism, discrimination, or slave ownership. Number 5, and this is the one where Springfield was why this one was chosen. It says, confusing to residents or not geographically representative of the district. Number 6, historically insignificant or no longer reflects of life in that part of the county. And then number 7, helpful for county members to aspire to the best possible quality of life in the future. So these have been our guiding principles through One Fairfax that we have had to adhere to. And so that's how Springfield came up. It only takes one person to have a question about it, and it gets on the table. And that's why I'm so glad that Mr. Harity is doing this town hall meeting today.
Thank you, Janae. Thank you for your work on this and the other renaming task force. I appreciate it very much.
Next person we have up is Nicole. Nicole, could you please unmute yourself and identify yourself before the town hall, please? Thank you.
Sure. I'm Nicole Miller. I'm Lee District, but I live in Springfield. And I understand the sensitive nature of the changes that are going on. But on the other side of it, the financial nature of it is a huge impact for us. As a federal employee, we are only getting 2 to 3% raises maxes. With the increased assessments, these new not needed initiatives that the board is coming forward with, like the new Metro discount, and which is going to bring those fees to the residents, the 700 and something million that's going to be put on in the budget next year. And then the changes at the schools, the new using the budget surplus to increase these roles that we won't have that budget surplus to pay for next year. It's a lot to add to people who are only getting a 2 to 3% raise, especially with the assessments of the homes going up and property taxes on our vehicles. And when you drive around Springfield, both sides of Springfield, West and regular Springfield, the needs of the people are not being met. There's just not enough money for the things that we need, like places for the homeless to go, and more funding for raises and bonuses to recruit cops and teachers, and lower income housing so people can actually afford to stay here. Spending unnecessary money to change any of these names is really, this is not the time, especially not in this economy, and not when people aren't making any more money. You just can't squeeze when people aren't making any more. And I appreciate Supervisor Harity for all he fights for the people, but the rest of the board needs to hear it as well. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you, Nicole. Next up, we have Ralph. Ralph, could you please unmute yourself and identify yourself before the town hall? Thank you.
Yes, hi, my name is Ralph Bell. I live very close to our government center, and I've lived in West Springfield just about all of my life. All of my kids have gone through West Springfield High School, and I think that the renaming of Springfield District is absolutely ludicrous. And I think that the county can find better things to do to improve the lives of our community members. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. And as I said before, I think that's the number one thing I'm hearing from folks. So I appreciate your comments.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Rick. Rick, could you please unmute yourself and identify yourself before the town hall?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Rick Avila. I live in the Crestwood area. I'm on the board of directors for our HOA at Springfield Village. I'm a retired federal service officer. I've lived all around the world, and I keep hearing these things about the name change, and I participated in the meetings on this Rodney had last year. Everything seems to come back to this push to rename because of slavery. And people that I heard in those meetings before the Rodney said they were being triggered by driving down the road and seeing a name that was related to a Confederate something, and that was triggering them to have anxiety and emotional impact, and it was negatively impacting their daily life. I don't, as a minority, and I look white, I am Mexican American. A lot of Latinos aren't all dark brown. I grew out of the Latin ghetto in Chicago, where my family's from. We lived by Wrigley Field. So I know prejudice and how people can be mean and nasty. We don't have that around here. We have great police officers. We have great civil servants in all parts of the county. We have great community members of every color, every creed. So this notion of if it's tied to somebody hundreds of years ago, we have to change it. It's just enough, like Matthew and others have said, enough's enough. If you're triggered that much that it's affecting you, you need to go see a therapist, a shrink, get on some medications. As a family man, raising my daughter who goes to Lee High School, I'm more concerned about the rising crime, where the kids literally can't go out on the street and play without, this is true, without another kid coming with a gun and a stolen car to try to kidnap my daughter or her friends that are other girls playing on the street. These are the issues that need to be addressed. Not wasting money to change signs. And if we change this magisterial district, it means nothing, as someone pointed out, the signs on 495, your mailing address, and so forth. It's a magisterial district. How many people actually pay attention to that? Very few.
Not too many.
No,
Very
and
few.
I've heard people here testify that were for the name change that couldn't tell Mr. Harity where they
Live.
what district where they lived. And if it's so expensive to you, yet you can't answer a simple question of which magisterial district you live in and where you go to vote and so forth. Well, it sounds kind of like a fake concern. And I will say this comes straight, this whole renaming thing comes straight from the Fairfax County Democratic Committee. I watched the leaked videos from their recent meetings that were put out on Twitter, where they specifically were going to target Mr. Harity to get him removed so that they could have full control of the board. And these were people involved in the meeting, and these are on the internet, that are on our public school board, Steve Descano, board members, board of supervisors members. So the whole agenda comes straight from them to doing this, so that we get more nonsense pushed down the average person. And my family is Latinos, were full Democrats, but this nonsense, the extremism to go so far swinging to the left, it's not for the working person. These people want to, if you want to better improve something, you want to name something, you know what, if it's that offensive to someone and you're caring about a 0.001% of a population, and they might be mentally insane or whatever, and they're just spouting off, well then that's ludicrous. I don't know what else we're going to do, because they're, like I said, they're specifically targeting Mr. Harity, and once they already have carte blanche, they outvote every time. No common sense.
Thank you, Rick.
Rick,
I just want to make
thank you.
sure that we're still good on time.
No, that's
and
all right.
we're
Thank
able
you
to,
for your thank you
sir.
for your comment, Rick. And I'm going to say one thing, Michael, here real quick before we go on to the next one. You know, I was born and raised in Fairfax County, Rick. My first house that I lived in was the last old house at the end of Hanover Road, right down by where you live. You know, in my dad's day, this was all about common sense. And really, when you were in local government, it wasn't Republican, Democrat, it was common sense, and it was get to the best answer for our citizens. And probably the biggest disappointment of my life has been to watch local politics erode to Republican versus Democrat, and
It's further down,
not,
isn't it?
anyway, it's pretty sad to see. I've been watching some of the chat. If somebody can send me that tape, I'd be very interested in seeing the tape that you referenced. But let's do that offline and do that separate. But thank you for your comments, Rick, and let's move on to the next speaker.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Laura. Laura, could you please unmute yourself and speak before the town hall?
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate Janae bringing up the 7 criteria and the fact that what we're focused on is number 5, that people are confused about the name geographically. And I can kind of understand that. If I don't live in Springfield, then yeah, I might be a little confused if I'm in the Springfield district. And I know we're not allowed to talk about what names we would come up with, but I think one of the other questions we have to ask ourselves is, do we really think that we as a community could come up with a new name that everybody would agree with? And I absolutely 100% do not think that we can do that. And it's just going to create more bad feelings. It's going to create more conflict. And that's just in addition to all of the other valid points that people have been making about just the waste of time and energy that we would be putting into renaming this district. I've got a suggestion for a name. Maybe we can go with the Commanders. That would be awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And while we're on geography, very good point, because, you know, my district really is, you know, four different districts, if you look at it, or 4 different sub areas. And you've got West Springfield, which is where the bulk of the population is, which is the Springfield piece. Then you've got the Occoquan watershed, in which Clifton, which is a small town of about 150 residents. You got the Occoquan watershed, which is completely different, because this is West Springfield's, you know, 50-year-old housing and very suburban. You've got the very rural Occoquan watershed. You go back out to my section where I live, there's a few new subdivisions out in Little Rocky Run. And then you've got a little bit more urban when you get to the Fairfax Corner area. So again, to come up with a name that represents all of those is kind of tough, but people have gotten used to Springfield and it's been theirs for a long, long time. But let's keep going. Thank you for your comments, Laura.
Thank you, Laura. At this time, are there any other members of the public that wish to raise their hand and have not had an opportunity to speak? If so, please raise your hand so that we can recognize you. Nicole, I see that you have your hand up. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
I just wanted to ask too, where can we find the estimated costs for the renaming initiatives that have occurred so far since this commission was made? Is that gonna be disclosed to the public, the actual expenditures on this? Just curious.
I've encouraged the RAC to get a briefing from our county attorney on what actions would be required to be taken and kind of what that goes. I think it's, you know, their original purview was to do the redistricting when there is a legal requirement that we have to do that. And I thought they did a good job of reaching out and getting citizen input, as I talked earlier, and coming up with the Consolidate Springfield. I don't know that they've got a cost estimate for this. I know for the Confederate Roads renaming, the 2 that we were looking at, there was a cost estimate of between $1 and $4 million on renaming those 2 roads, but that excludes the cost to the individual businesses of the raw cost of actually having to legally change their address, et cetera, as well as the soft cost of lost customers and difficulty people finding them and that sort of thing. So I don't know that we've got a good handle on any of those costs. That's a question I continue to ask and will continue to ask. But I don't, Paul, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think we have an answer on that yet.
I believe Chairman Barry has left the meeting, sir.
Janae, have they talked about that anymore? Am I missing anything? If you've got any, you can just shake your head if you don't. Okay, so I'm hoping we get that, but I don't think we have it yet, Nicole.
Thank you. I'm on the side of the financial part of it, and I think that full disclosure to those of us that are on that side would be of value for us, like really accepting these changes that are needed. I think once we can get the whole total, you know, what it's really going to cost us and what we're taking away from things that we could spend that on, I think that would be really helpful. But I know that in the past that the board, not you, but the rest of the board has not been full disclosure with their constituents. And so I'm hopeful that if you get it, at least we can see it.
Okay, I'll continue to work to get that.
One-
Janae,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead, Janae.
Yeah, I could bring up one thing. We did want to have an 8th question, and I wanted it to be on the economic impact that it would have.
Yep.
And they took it off. And the reason why they took it off was because that's not what this committee is for. And I said, well, even if it's not for, I think we need to know how much this is going to cost us. So I just wanted to let you know that certainly our, people, I did push for that, and it was told that it couldn't be added. So I just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, very, very similar to the road renaming task force that was told that they couldn't look at cost. So I think that's something we absolutely need to look at and should be looking at, and should be weighed into this, but I'm one of 10. Looks like John's got his hands up.
John, please
Michael, you
unmute
up?
yourself and speak before the town hall.
John, I can see you talking, but we can't hear you. It shows that you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. It shows you're muted now.
I'll work with John to try to get him online.
Do we
In the
have anybody
meantime,
else?
If we have any other speakers, please raise your hand.
All right, I believe that is, do we have anybody else, Michael? Do you want to give a second to try to get to John, or?
I'm gonna try to get John on, if we can wait for him. I do see that Laura and Elaine have their hands up, so I'll start with Laura while I work with getting John online.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Just one last quick question. If we do want to communicate officially our opinion on this, what is the best way to do that?
The best way to communicate with me is either typically by email. Springfield BOS@fairfaxcounty.gov is the best email. So it's Springfield BOS@fairfaxcounty.gov. Our phone number is 703-451-8873. And we certainly, I think the renaming committee also has an email address. Like I said, they've gotten 200 emails, mostly opposed to renaming. I just saw Mary Jane in the chat ask who makes the final decision. It will be the Board of Supervisors, but Janae, do you have the rest of the timeline since Paul dropped off? You're on mute.
Okay, what I can tell you is we need to have it done by March 1st.
Yep.
And as you know, the committee started in January, and there will be a presentation. However, because it's all moving so fast, we may end our meetings by the end of February. We may do all the voting and just go ahead and go with the district names and the precinct names. But as far as his presentation, he needs to have it ready to go by, and so that's why this town meeting is just vital. We had to have it right away if we were going to discuss this.
Yeah.
So that's a timetable.
And the process after that, and I was asked that on the radio yesterday, has not been shared with the board. So I understand they're giving this presentation to the chamber, to the chairman, and I don't know what the process is after that, because one has not been shared by those that are running the process. And Michael also shared in the chat the redistricting advisory committee's email is redistricting, all one word, at fairfaxcounty.gov. So redistricting at fairfaxcounty.gov. So do we have any other hands up?
Yes, we had Laura. Laura, could you please unmute yourself and speak before the town hall?
I already asked my question. Thanks.
Thank you, Laura. Elaine, I believe you're next. Can you please identify yourself before the town hall and unmute yourself?
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Matthew. Or Michael, I already got my question answered. Mr. Harity brought up that it was not yet a done deal, I guess, and I have a way to follow up. I did have another question though, since I'm on. So is this all about politics? Because I'm not sure. I thought it was like that, and I'd hate to think that it's about that. That seems very sad.
Well, I hate to think it's about that too. There are a couple of newspapers that think it's about that, and they've published some op-eds that say they think it's about that. You heard Frank Anderson from Supervisor Walkinshaw's office saying he doesn't see it's about that. There's supposedly some tape floating around somewhere that says it is about that. So I don't know what it is, but again, I was always taught that when you have both sides of an argument, you get to a better answer. When you only have one side of an argument, you don't get to a better answer. So, but I think, and that's the value I think I serve, is being the other side of the argument, so we can get the better answers to our residents, so we can start focusing on some of the problems that we need to focus on. But I can't say it's all politics. I'm going to be very interested to see the tape that was referenced, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Elaine. At this time, do we have any other speakers wishing to raise their hand in the time allotted? Okay, Supervisor, at this time, I do not see any other members of the public wishing to speak. So with your permission, we will move towards closing remarks.
Okay, I just want to thank everybody. I really do appreciate all the comments on both sides of this argument. It is important that we hear from you, that we listen to you, and I plan to do that. I believe the RAC did that in their last process with redistricting. I can only hope that the board doesn't do the same thing again and go the other direction. But if you've got any further questions, don't hesitate to contact our office at 703-451-8873 or by email, as I said before, springfieldbos@fairfaxcounty.gov. And the email address for the Redistricting Advisory Committee is redistricting@fairfaxcounty.gov. And I know they do answer those emails. And again, I very, very much appreciate everybody's time tonight, and look forward to continuing to serve all of you. Thank you very much.